Welcome to the People Leaders Podcast, the audio resource for managers and business leaders creating high-performing teams. Join leadership and team development experts Jan and Michelle Turkelson each week as they explore both subjects from every angle. Through practical tips, valuable insights, and compelling interviews with leadership experts around the world, you'll learn how to bring out the best in your staff and how to give your best as a leader.
Hello, Michelle.
Oh, hello, Jan. How are you?
Very good. So we could say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when and where you actually hear the podcast. It's interesting. We get feedback from people. They listen it in the car. They listen with their team. There are lots of ways that you can use this podcast, even if it's a little micro learning bite for your team. Whereas this one is specifically for people who are new to a role. And we're going to talk about the biggest mistakes. So we're going to share the 5 biggest mistakes that people make when they are new to a role or new to a position. And we're going to cover a couple of situations. So a scenario could be someone who is new to an organisation or someone who is already in the organisation, but they're just taking on a different role. So we're going to make sure that we cover all of them. All right. So drum roll, please.
Yay!
The first biggest mistake that people make is that they create change straight away because they think that a quick win assumes that they are someone who is action-oriented, they're going to get a good reputation, and maybe that's the reason why they were brought in. Now, that could be the reason why you were brought in, but this is one of the biggest mistakes that we see people make. And the reason why this is a mistake is because when you first come in, it's really challenging to understand the underlying context and culture of an organisation. They say that it takes up to 90 days to become enculturated into an organisation. So it is actually a good opportunity to see what is going on from a fresh perspective, whether or not you are already in the organisation or not. So creating those changes straight away is a little bit of dangerous territory. So that would be the first mistake that I would really encourage people not to do.
Yeah. And so, what is the antidote to that, Jan? And, we were talking about that earlier, and it's listening. Take the time to listen to your team, listen to your key stakeholders, or whether it's customers, and then you'll get a better sense about, what straight away looks like. Is straight away, I'm going to make some incremental changes, within, 60 days. That's when, but I'm getting my plan together. So, yeah, totally agree. That's a big one, feeling as though you have to create change straight away. Number 2 is making assumptions. That's one of the biggest mistakes we've found managers new to the role can make, making assumptions about the people, because you may have heard, or maybe your boss has said, oh, look, watch these people in your team, got a bad reputation, blah, blah, blah. And so you take that on and make that, and then you're looking for it, you're looking out for those signs. And so, make assumptions, maybe that your boss is right. You're making an assumption there. So, and making an assumption about what needs to change, about what the business is about and what your team needs to do. So again, it's that, the antidote is, get to know your people, keep a journal, sort of reflect on, what you've noticed in your first sort of week or two. And then the plan will really sort of reveal itself in a way, won't it?
And I've actually been a part of a coaching situation where someone actually did make this mistake when they came on board, and they made assumptions about certain people in the group, and certain people in the group who were quite extroverted, who perhaps, introduced themselves to the manager and was in their ear quite a lot. And so this manager thought, oh, they're on my side, they really are supportive, etc. However, they were really undermining this person because they went for the role as well and didn't know, and which caused a lot of friction. So again, just making assumptions. And obviously we want to make if we're going to make assumptions, let's be generous. Let's be generous about it. But just be mindful about what it is that, let's collect data. let's see observe behaviours as opposed to, just things that we're hearing. So really listen and ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
So number 3, one of the biggest mistakes we see is assuming that your manager's job is to get you up to speed and to direct you. And we're telling you now that they are, if you think you're busy, they're usually twice as busy. Not all the time, I know, but, from our experience, we find that to be the case. So if we assume that it's your manager's job to get you up to speed and they do not have the time, then you're kind of like left in a little bit of limbo. So, and I have seen people, assume that that's what, they were just waiting for their manager, to give them to direction, introduce them to stakeholders. And then for the, I think it was like 90 days, this person was a little bit of an underperformer. And I was looking through some research this morning, and on new hires, if someone hasn't performed well within the first 90 days, there is like a 90% chance that they will be an underperformer anyway, because it's just really hard to shift perceptions, reputation, things like that. So let's just be mindful that if you are new to a role, that's why it's so important, for the first 2 that we talked about is, don't assume and don't just go in and change things.
Yeah, so because I think that, maybe some people listening to this might be saying, okay, in the first 90 days, are you saying don't do anything because you said, you don't want to create change straight away? What's the real message there? And in terms of creating change straight away, it's almost like, are you doing the research? Are you, talking to people? That's what we mean when we say don't jump in and, create change straight away. Use those first 90 days to collect data, to create relationships, to start to make a plan and share that with your manager. That's what we're talking about when we say don't, create change straight away, but get work done.
Yeah, and when we say change, wholesale change as well. There are certain little processes and things that you can change. But again, everything is contextual, because your job might be to create wholesale change. All it means is the timeline is going to be shorter. You still need to listen, check assumptions, ask questions, get to know the people, get to know the business. So what would I do if I'm not going to assume that my manager's job is to get me up to speed? Again, do those things. I'd pick 3 people in the business that you need to get to know, a key stakeholder, someone in your team or someone who your team works closely with, and really start to gather data.
Terrific. That's great. Okay, so mistake number 4 is not being clear about your remit. And again, this thing circling around is making assumptions. So get clear early about why it is you were hired for this role and what the expectation is. And maybe your manager doesn't know, they just, needed a gap to be filled. You were a good resource. And so, go for it. And so you think, how do I get clear about my remit? And again, your advice, Jan, about pick 3 people in the business and ask them, start to ask people, ask your team, look at what are the things that we need in order to be a highly effective team? What are some of the processes that we may need to refine or improve in order to do our job better for the organisation? What's our reputation in terms of customers and stakeholders? So there are some real key areas that you can start to get clear about what you want to achieve. And again, one of the tools that we talk about all the time is, so do your success well. What does success look like for me, for this team, for my role over the next 3 to 6 months, for example?
And so number 5, biggest mistake that we have found is creating the plan and then producing it to the team and go, ta-da, here it is. And it also, this assuming that you have to do it, you have to do the thinking behind it. You setting the vision, I think, is important, for the team, and having that as an idea and a starting point. However, creating the plan with the team, having a framework and a structure so the team know how to input into that framework or that plan is going to be really important. So the biggest mistake is not engaging the team in your plan and not communicating the plan with your team. And the best way of doing that is to create the plan with your team so they can actually see what you want them to, what you're creating as a team.
Yeah. So a tip for managers that I've seen try to introduce this is sometimes your team members may not have the experience, the capacity, or the wherewithal to add a lot of value early. So do the thinking first. And put that in your back pocket, because you can draw it out. Because if you present the team with a blank piece of butcher's paper and say, hey, let's create, you may not get very far potentially. So have a structure and a process, be clear about the questions that you're going to ask, and also have an overall picture of what you think success looks like in all those key areas that you're trying to create a plan around.
And, and your organisation will have some tools usually around how to create a plan. But even if you don't have anything to start with, do some research around, okay, if I was to do a plan, it'd be good to do a SWOT analysis. So I know what our strengths and weaknesses are. I know what our opportunities, what are some of the big ticket items that as a team we need to be mindful of? Is it reporting, financial? Is it processes, stakeholders, things like that? And create some objectives around those, and then you actually can then allot and assign accountability and action steps. And when the team is engaged in this process, then there's usually just more buy-in. Yeah. All right.
Have we got a bonus, Jan? Because I'm thinking, there is one thing that is jumping around in my mind at the moment, and that is about another mistake that we see managers new to the role make, is that they jump in and they forget about their own health and well-being. It's all about that. They try and make a big impact early, and they forget about their body, their body and their mind that has to make the impact, and they don't look after themselves. They they don't take time out to rest and recuperate and hydrate and all those things that they need in order to sustain them during the first 90 days. It's a big deal, a lot of stress. So you really want to look after yourself. And we see a lot of managers have made, particularly newer managers, more seasoned managers get it, or have learned from their mistakes. That's what they've shared with us. So definitely look after your health and well-being.
Yeah. So let's just reiterate, and when people are listening to this podcast, you might already be in a role, but you might be thinking about changing, especially with the Great Resignation. It's a very fluid market. So whether or not you want to stay in your organisation, there may be shifts because organisations are changing rapidly now. So part of it is you have to be prepared. So just think about some of these things when we go through the biggest mistakes. So number one, creating change straight away. That's one of the biggest mistakes.
Yeah.
Number two?
Yeah, number two was making assumptions about people and about the business.
Three, we can see a theme here, assuming that it's your manager's role to get you up to speed and to direct you.
Yep. Number four, not being clear about your remit.
And number five is creating the plan solo and then giving it to the team. And then the bonus.
Yeah, not looking after yourself.
Yeah, and I think that we can all take that as a little bit of a reminder, like what am I doing to fill myself up? Because it's your state of being, who you are being in every interaction and every moment that will create the quality interactions that will allow you to, enjoy your work and, get meaning from it. So hopefully you've learnt something, or just be reminded really of, what we could do more of or less of. And
good luck.
Good luck.
Give us some feedback.
Yes.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the People Leaders Podcast. For show notes and other resources, please visit us at peopleleaderspodcast.com. While you're there, you can subscribe for future episodes so you can continue your own leadership journey. And please be sure to share this and other episodes with your friends and colleagues. The People Leaders Podcast is brought to you by the Experts on Air Podcast Network.